Hey, and welcome back. This is James Knight with IDP Plus. We are here with the Week 5 offensive rankings. And guess what, guys? We've got 4 weeks of data. We've got some great data points, and we've got some great rankings this week. We're going to be going quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, top 12 for each position. Stay tuned and check out who we've got in the top 12 for each one of your offensive ranks for this week. Hey, and again, guys, welcome back. Quick reminder, these stats are based on PPR and 12-team leagues. So that's why we're doing top 12 for each position, QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, tight end 1, top 12 offensive rankings for the week. Let's dig in and see what we've got going on this week. This week, I've got Josh Allen as my QB1 on the week. He is traveling. No, he's at home. Excuse me. Buffalo is at home versus the New England Patriots this week. It's a Sunday night game, divisional game. It's Josh Allen. Not a whole lot more to say. QB1 on the week. QB2 on the week for me. Not a surprise over the past couple of years. He's finally come back, and I think he's going to hit huge this week. Is Patrick Mahomes. He's at Jacksonville. It's going to be a big game for them. Mahomes has been rolling, and he looks like the Mahomes of old. Got Worthy back last week, changed the entire dynamic of the offense. They're going to be scoring a lot of points. I've got Patrick Mahomes at QB2. My QB3 this week is Justin Herbert. I like Justin Herbert for the Chargers this week. He's at home versus the Washington Commanders. I think Herbert's, they're slinging the ball all over the place. He looks in command of the offense. His plantar fasciitis is completely behind him from last year. He's starting to run around and do some things. He's my QB3 this week. At quarterback 4, I've got Drake May for the New England Patriots visiting Buffalo. Again, primetime game. That's going to be Sunday night. I think there's going to be a lot of explosives there. I'll touch base here in a second on why I like him as good as I do this week, but I've got Drake May at QB4. QB5 this week, I've got Jaden Daniels for the Washington Commanders visiting the Los Angeles Chargers. This could turn into a shootout if Jaden Daniels is healthy. Be sure to pay attention to the injury report. Make sure that Daniels is playing this week. If he is, I've got him locked and loaded as the number 5 quarterback for this week. At number 6, I've got Justin Fields for the New York Jets playing at home versus the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys are giving up huge amounts of fantasy points to quarterbacks every single week. They look like they can't stop anybody. Justin Fields showed last week he's dynamic, can run and do what he needs to do. Huge rushing floor, and I love those, the Konami cheat code quarterbacks. If they can get you rushing yards, give you a huge floor there, they're high end. I like Justin Fields as QB6. My QB7 this week is my lack of better terms, my ride or die this year. I've been advocating for him. I've been advocating for each one of the actual top 3 sophomore quarterbacks from last year. But this is Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos. They are traveling to Philadelphia. This is going to be a tough game. I think there's a lot of shootout potential here between these two teams. It's going to be a lot of varying differential. I don't think Denver's going to be able to run. I think Philadelphia is. I think Bo Nix is going to be able to put up some points. He did last week. He finished QB5 on the week last week. I like him as my QB7 this week. Coming in at QB8 for me, I've got Daniel Indiana Jones. Yes, the nickname has stuck. I love it. People still calling him Danny Dimes. Love that. Keep it however you want. He is at home for the New York Giants this week versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders, they've got Crosby. They've got a little bit of pass rush. Jones is athletic enough to avoid that. He's top 5 in passing yards this year. I think he's 3rd overall in passing yards. He's adding some numbers on the ground. Again, Konami cheat code quarterback. Give him his flowers as the QB8 this week. At QB9, I've got Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals. They're at home versus the Tennessee Titans. Titans couldn't do anything right last week. They couldn't score. They couldn't do anything else. I think there's going to be a lot of short fields in this game. We saw Marvin Harrison Jr. have kind of a breakout game where he seemed like he got things together. I like that a lot. I like Kyler Murray a lot. I think they're going to put up some good points there. I don't think they're going to blow Tennessee out completely to the point where it gets to the point, where they're pulling starters. So I like Kyler Murray as my QB9 this week. At QB10, I've got Tua Tagovailoa. Him and the Dolphins are traveling to Carolina. Carolina's hit or miss on defense. They seem to pick it up here and there. I'll touch base a little bit more on why I like Tua this week as QB10 here in a second. QB11 this week, it's Thursday night matchup, San Francisco, LA Rams. It's going to be in LA. I like Matthew Stafford. The San Francisco 49ers look absolutely banged up. So far today, we've got Brock Purdy out, Jawan Jennings out, Ricky Pearsall out. We already know they're without George Kittle. Nick Bosa is out on the defensive side of the ball. They haven't been able to do a whole lot on defense, despite Robert Saleh really pushing for that defense to get better. And I think, there's better days ahead for the 49ers, but a game against Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kieran Williams, even Tutu Atwell got involved last week. I like Matthew Stafford as my QB 11 this week. My quarterback 12 to round out your top 12 this week is Jared Goff. I know Jared's not indoors this week. He's not at home in Detroit. He's not even in a dome, but he is traveling to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. Like I said, Bo Nix was QB5 last week, picked them apart. Detroit is starting to put the pieces together where the offense looks reminiscent of years past where they've been a top 2, top 3 offense. I like him as QB12 this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, keep in mind, we do have some injuries to watch. I touched on Brock Purdy earlier. He is out, so we will have Mac Jones starting for the San Francisco 49ers this week. Lamar Jackson, who got pulled out of the Kansas City Chiefs game where him and the Ravens were doing battle with them, wasn't a score thing. It actually turned out that he had a hamstring injury. Looks like it might cost him some time. Looks like Cooper Rush is going to be scheduled to start this week, so pay attention to that. Joe Burrow is obviously out. He'll be out a while. So we got another Jake Browning start incoming. J.J. McCarthy is out, so we got Carson Wentz there. And another key thing that is not injury related is that the Cleveland Browns have decided to bench Joe Flacco this week in favor of Dylan Gabriel. You heard that right. Not Shedeur Sanders, but Dylan Gabriel. Kind of an interesting aspect there. Lamar goes down. We heard the rumors of Shedeur was going to go to Baltimore to be a backup, but he didn't really want to. He turned him down. He'd probably be starting for the Ravens this week. Instead, he's the backup, or at least the backup, maybe even worse. Flacco might be the backup, but Dylan Gabriel, the lefty, gets the start for the Cleveland Browns. On to my fade this week, and it's hard to fade him because, like I said, the news is talking about how much of a winner he is, and he is. Super Bowl champion, man's got a ring. He's got the aura that just the cigar picture of him after the championship last year was phenomenal. It's Jalen Hurts. I know he's at home in Philadelphia, and he's playing the Denver Broncos this week. The Broncos are pretty stingy against the pass. And when I say stingy, they give up the fewest points to fantasy quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's about as stingy as it gets. Not to mention the fact, Tampa Bay, not the greatest pass defense in the world. They held Jalen Hurts without a completion last week. Kudos to Hurts. He went out and got the win. They still got the win. Philadelphia beat the Buccaneers, but no completions in the second half. Furthermore, the Broncos lead the NFL in sacks this year. They have 15 sacks through 4 games, and they're going to put a ton of pressure on them. I think they're going to take the aerial assault out this week. There's not going to be which Philadelphia isn't known for that lately anyway. Hurts and the company averaging less than 200 yards passing since last year. I mean, you look at them, that's very low volume. There's going to be a lot of pressure there. They'll have some success on the ground. I think they're going to run Barkley. I think Hurts will probably put up some rushing yards, but I don't like him in my top 12 this week. So I'm fading him. Touching on some guys that I like higher than consensus that you may have been like, oh, what was that about? One of those guys is Drake May that I've got a QB for. He travels into Buffalo for Sunday night. It's a primetime game. Again, Konami cheat code quarterbacks. They put up big numbers. They give you a good floor. They do certain things. There's also the capability they scramble, hit a touchdown. Drake May is averaging almost 25 yards rushing per game this season. That's 2.5 points. He gets in the end zone. It's 8.5 points. You're already got a floor for a guy who's also in the right outside of the top 5 at number 6 in passing yards on the season. Factor that with the the whole point of what the New England Patriots want to do. May is coming into this game with a 3-game streak of multiple touchdown passes. So that's 3 straight games now where he's thrown at least 2 touchdown passes. He's got a Sunday night divisional primetime matchup with Josh Allen. I really, really believe that he's going to do his best to go toe-to-toe with him. Don't get me wrong. I am not going out on a limb here predicting any kind of upsets, but I'm telling you, Drake May is going to put on a show this week in Buffalo, and he's my QB4 because of that. Another quarterback that I like higher than consensus, and, dumpster fire, you call it whatever you want. There's all kinds of reasons to fade him, but I got Tua at Carolina this week is my QB10. The reason for that, and multiple reasons, but the number one reason is that offense through Mike McDaniel always finds a way. And even when they can't do certain things, they find playmakers, they do certain things. Tua is coming to this game just like Drake May. 3-game, multiple touchdown streak coming to this. So he's thrown multiple touchdowns, 3 straight games. I think their short speed attack is going to be troublesome for Carolina. Not to mention the fact that last week they got Darren Waller back, and he just jumped right back into the fray, caught 2 touchdowns, looks unstoppable. There's going to be too much for Carolina to try to defend. They're already a little weak against guarding running backs, and we know that the Miami Dolphins have Devon Achane. Devon Achane could catch 6-7 passes in this game. I'd be shocked if the Panthers keep him out of the end zone. And I think that's gonna give Tua multiple touchdown passes again this week, despite the fact Tyreek Hill went down with a dislocated knee. Keep an eye on Malik Washington. Malik Washington is an absolute monster at wide receiver. He's been waiting for his time to come up. And then the addition of Nick Westbrook Akine. Shout out Rich Eisen for calling that a great pickup in the offseason. The Dolphins are still going to have good 3 wide receiver sets. They're still going to have Waller. They're going to attack Carolina. And Carolina's not going to be able to stop Tua from being a top 10 quarterback. I got him at QB 10 this week. On the other side of that, let's keep moving forward. Our top 12 running backs this week, okay? At QB, at RB1, you can't argue this at all. It's Christian McCaffrey. It's the 49ers. They're traveling to LA, so it's not a huge distance over there. It's still West Coast for them and doing stuff. It's going to be a Thursday night primetime game. We touched on the fact that the 49ers are without everybody, it seems like. Brock Purdy is out. Jennings is out. Pearsall is out. Kittle is out. McCaffrey, the jokes are made that he's turned into some sort of vampire where he's literally leeching the health off of all of his other teammates where he can stay healthy because people thought he couldn't stay healthy. He's the last man standing, and whether it's running or receiving, McCaffrey's going to come up with numbers, and I like him for well over 100 scrimmage yards in this game, 5, 6, 7, 8 recs. I'd be shocked if the Rams can keep him out of the end zone, being the biggest show there. I like him as RB1. At RB2 this week, I've got touched on it with the two alike. Devon Achane. He's traveling to Carolina. Carolina gives up a ton of rushing yards. They bleed rushing yards like nobody's business. And they did that all the way to last year. They give up the 12th most to the position now, fantasy points to the running back position. Not to mention the fact that Achane is one of those, you got the Konami cheat codes for the quarterbacks. This is like the Konami cheat code for running backs is the Achanes, the Camaras, the Christian McCaffreys, the Breece Halls. These guys are going to catch 50, 60, 70 passes, maybe even more every year. Achane's good for 6 to 7 this week. I like him as running back 2. My running back 3 this week is Jahmyr Gibbs. I like Jahmyr Gibbs in the game against Cincinnati. He's not going to be in Detroit. We touched on that with golf a little bit. But the Bengals can't stop anybody, and I think that Gibbs is going to get a ton of touches there. He's the touchdown guy. He's also the spread has jumped from almost 50-50 between him and Montgomery to where he's getting closer 60, 70, percent of the touches. That backfield share is going to be huge for him. Got to watch out for the fact that maybe a blowout game comes in, and if that happens, he gets pulled early, but I've got him at RB3. RB4 this week, I've got Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts at home versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have an excellent team. dynamic, and they're trying to build up. They drafted Ashawn Janty. They did a bunch of things. They got Max Crosby as a defensive staple. They don't have near enough firepower to stop the Indianapolis Colts. It's Jonathan Taylor. He's my RB4 this week. At RB5, I've got a Marion Hampton. Marion Hampton is the leading running back for the Chargers now that they've lost Najee Harris. He had his breakout last week showing well in pass protection, also showing soft hands. And, I think he's my RB5 this week because the Commanders, if Jaden Daniels plays, could turn into a little bit of a shootout. I think Hampton will be on the field for the majority of that. He'll catch passes. And we saw him efficiently run the ball last week. Harbaugh and company are just getting started with him. He's an official game breaker, if you will, as my RB5 this week. My RB6 this week is Saquon Barkley. Feels weird ranking him that low, but his efficiency's been a little down this year as he's averaging just a smidge over 3 yards per carry, kind of out there. And they're playing Denver. The reason I like him as my RB6 this week is I think the Eagles, as I touched on, the Jalen Hurts fade is going to honestly the Eagles are going to have to run the ball. Barkley's going to give them fits. He's going to be able to catch a few passes out of the backfield, but I think they're going to really give him 20-plus carries this week. And if they want to compete and put up big points, I think they're going to have to do it on the ground. My RB7 this week, one of my personal favorites. If you follow me on X, you know it's pinned to my profile. I believed in him before the draft, believed in him when he was at Georgia. It's James Cook is my RB7 this week. He's in the primetime game Sunday night at home versus New England. Despite everybody, he's too small. He can't score enough touchdowns. Huge touchdown guy. He keeps scoring every single week. Got him as my RB7. RB8 this week is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is the king. I know the fumbling issues are there, but to fade him any further than outside of the top 10 is insane. He's a guy who can run for 2,000 yards in a season. He still is putting up numbers. And I think this week without Lamar Jackson, he's going to show out, and they're going to feed him early and often against the Houston Texans at home. Texans defense, D'Amico Ryans always has them pretty stout, but Derrick Henry will get better as the game goes on. I've got him as RB8. RB9 this week, I've got Breece Hall for the New York Jets at home versus the Dallas Cowboys. Breece Hall, mentioned him in the Konami cheat code running back type thing. He's that cheat code because he's involved in the offense dynamically, whether it be rushing or receiving. He puts up a ton of numbers. Dallas's defense couldn't stop anything at all. They're going to give up tons of points. I like Breece Hall right here at RB10. My RB11 on the week is Cam Skattebo, the angry scepter receiver. This man, him and Jackson Dart last week, led a huge Giants victory against an previously undefeated LA Chargers team. He got tons of touches. Now with the injury to Tyrone Tracy, Skattebo is going to be the lead back there. He's going to get plenty of touches. I think the New Orleans Saints, which the Giants' opposition this week is in New Orleans against the Saints, they're going to try to stop Dart from being able to run and do things, and I think Skattebo will find his way in the end zone as RB11 this week. RB12 this week is Alvin Kamara. Cheat code. This man will catch 7 to 10 passes and can do a bunch of things. He's on the opposite side of Skattebo this week, where he's the starting running back for the New Orleans Saints. Saints don't have a whole lot on offense. It's pretty much Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, a little bit of Rashid Shaheed. I don't think the Giants are going to blow the Saints out. So I think there's going to be a little more running room, a little more involvement in the running game for Kamara. There might be some worry about Kendre Miller getting some touches there, but I'm not fading Alvin Kamara. I've got him at RB12. My biggest fade of the week this week, and I hate to do it after last week because he did have his breakout and looked fantastic, is Ashton Janty. Janty had a huge breakout last week, looked super involved for the Raiders. They looked fantastic, but the Raiders this week travel to Indianapolis and face the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts have given up the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs this season, and I think Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor are going to get out to a pretty significant lead on the Raiders. We're probably going to see Geno Smith throwing the ball 30, 40 times this week at minimum. And the crazy part about it is J.T. was a really good receiver in college. But this year he's averaging less than 2 receptions per game and has 20 yards total receiving. So unless he gets involved in the passing game, he's a fade for me. I don't see him being an actual top 12 running back this week. The running backs that I do like higher than consensus this week, I touched on it a little bit earlier, Amarian Hampton. He is my RB5 on the week. He had a breakout week, similar to J.T. last week. Good week for rookie running backs. Washington kind of a little better than middle of the pack at giving up rushing yards, but I don't think that's where Hampton really hurts them. Again, I think we need to keep an eye on the injury report. If Jaden Daniels is playing, I think this Chargers-Commanders game turns into more of a shootout. We're going to probably see 7 to 10 points, give or take, receiving-wise for Hampton. Additionally, 50, 60 yards on the ground. I think that's got him in there where he's going to be RB5 this week. He finds the end zone, puts him as RB5. I like him higher than consensus. The other running back that I like higher than consensus is my RB11, Cam Skattebo. There's not much to not like there. Like I said, him and the Giants travel to New Orleans. The Saints have given up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs. Skattebo, without Tracy, doesn't have a whole lot of competition for touches. Devin Singletary's not eating into his touch load. Anything less than 25, 26, 28 touches in this game probably means something went wrong for the Giants. I think it's going to be close enough where the Giants don't really blow them out, but I think we're going to get a healthy dose of Skattebo, and I think he's going to score a touchdown this week. Got him at RB11. Moving on to wide receivers. If you had drafted this year, it was a huge year for people to fade running backs. 7 to 8 of the top 12 picks in your first round this year were most likely wide receivers. Huge wide receiver trend. Crazy part is there's been some separation there where the top guys are still, you've got some guys like Puka, Mon-Ra, and those guys putting up points. And that leads me into my wide receiver 1, which is Puka Nacua this week. Divisional matchup at home versus the 49ers. Puka shows up regardless. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 this week against a banged-up 49ers unit. My wide receiver 2 for the week is Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith-Njigba has not missed a beat at all. The Seahawks gave up or let DK Metcalf walk, and Tyler Lockett. Smith-Njigba has jumped right into that top spot, is commanding targets at an insane rate, and he is at home versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. I don't think the Bucs have enough to stop him. I like him as wide receiver 2. My wide receiver 3 is a guy that should have been at the top of the list all the time. You always hear it, but the injury to Joe Burrow has really hurt him. It's Jamar Chase, who's at home versus the Detroit Lions. We've all seen the jokes. We all see the stuff. The Bengals may go home at halftime for getting blown out, but Jamar Chase has got a chip on his shoulder, and after the altercation we saw on the sideline last week, he's going to want the ball early and often. And I think even if they get blown out, Chase probably gets 10 to 12 targets minimum probably this week against Detroit. And even if they lose by 20 points, I like him as wide receiver 3 this week. My wide receiver 4 this week is Amon-Ra St. Brown, talking about guys who just keep putting up points. Him and Puka pacing the leagues, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, depending on your settings. He travels to Cincinnati with the Detroit Lions. I got Goff as my quarterback 12 this week. I got Amon-Ra St. Brown as my wide receiver 4 this week. Should destroy Cincinnati, even in a blowout. He's going to get his numbers before they call him to the sidelines. My wide receiver 5 this week is George Pickens. George Pickens absolutely just went bonkers last week. No CeeDee Lamb, no target competition. Didn't matter. He makes the most insane catches on contested catches, does all kinds of stuff. Him and the Dallas Cowboys are traveling to New York to face the Jets this week. The Jets are not the defensive team they have been in years past. I like George Pickens as my wide receiver 5 this week. My wide receiver 6 on the week comes from the Carolina Panthers, who are at home versus the Miami Dolphins. It's Teteroa McMillan. This rookie has come in and absolutely looks like an alpha. He looks in that same kind of build as we saw Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. last year. He's commanding targets. And against the Dolphins just, surprisingly enough, they've given up the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. But on the same flip side of that, it's probably because they haven't had to, because they haven't been that competitive at all. So I've got Teteroa McMillan as my wide receiver 6 this week. I really like him. Wide receiver 7 for me this week is Zay Flowers. I know. Lamar Jackson is out, hamstring injury, yada, yada, yada. Fantastic. That's okay. Baltimore is at home versus the Houston Texans. They're going to put Cooper Rush in. We saw Cooper Rush. He was okay when he filled in for Dak when Dak was down in Dallas. And I think he'll be okay here. One of the things he does is he locks into his number one target. Zay Flowers is going to be his number one read on multiple plays. And I think that means Zay Flowers is going to be good for probably a touchdown this week. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 7, 8 targets. I like him as my wide receiver 7 this week. At wide receiver 8, we got a guy who just came back healthy last week. He's got a primetime matchup in Jacksonville versus the Jaguars. I've got Xavier Worthy for the Kansas City Chiefs. They used him everywhere, last week. He ran the ball. He ran deep outs. He ran intermediate routes. They got him the ball in space on some screens and did some stuff. He's my wide receiver 8 this week with the Mahomes resurgent. I like how they used him. I see him as wide receiver 8. My wide receiver 9 this week is Nico Collins for the Houston Texans at Baltimore. Even with Cooper Rush in the lineup, I think Baltimore's going to try to put up some points. Houston's going to try to stop them. Derrick Henry is going to do some stuff. I think Zay Flowers is going to get targeted a couple times, a bunch of times. Check the injury report, though, for Nico Collins. On Wednesday, he did pop up with a questionable injury tag, so make sure you check on him before the end of the week to make sure you can start him in your lineups. And, each one of these guys is blowing up. And Nico's my wide receiver 9. My wide receiver 10 is Deebo Samuel. He's got the same questionable tag, though, as Nico Collins. So be sure to check that injury report to make sure he's playing this week. He's wide receiver 10 for me as the Washington Commanders travel to L.A. to face the Chargers. I think if Jaden Daniels is in this game, him and Herbert square off, this could turn into a shootout. Deebo Samuel's getting touches out of the backfield. They're manufacturing touches for him. He's fit like a glove into that Cliff Kingsbury offense. My wide receiver 11 this week is Emeka Egbuka. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Seattle to face the Seahawks. Seahawks have been pretty good against the pass, but at the same time, Mike Evans is out this week. We don't know if Chris Godwin's 100% up to speed. He looked okay last week. There's also the report that Bucky Irving was walking around in a boot, so we might see Rachaad White and Sean Tucker try to run there. Wouldn't be surprised to see Baker Mayfield air it out a lot. I don't think Mayfield comes up with huge numbers, but I think a bunch of passes will end up going Egbuka's way. I see him as wide receiver 11. My wide receiver 12 this week is Marvin Harrison Jr. Touched on him, and when I talked about Kyler Murray a little bit, he had a breakout game last week, kind of a thank you, God moment. He was like, the hands are here. The hands were always there. They were there in college. He just kind of had some yips where he dropped passes that he shouldn't have been dropping, kind of some mental lapses maybe. It looked like maybe there was some clarity last week. I like him as wide receiver 12 this week, where the Arizona Cardinals are at home versus the Tennessee Titans. My biggest fade this week at wide receiver, and this is tough too, is Justin Jefferson. I love Justin Jefferson, traded for him in multiple fantasy leagues, but I'm fading him this week. He's got the 9:30 game for the Vikings. It's supposed to be at Cleveland, but it's the London game, so it'll be the early international game for this week. Cleveland gives up the 16th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. That's kind of middle of the pack, obviously, but that's not what worries me. What worries me is their defensive front that's going to get after backup quarterback Carson Wentz. Wentz, when he gets pressured, tends to make bad decisions. And I think Jefferson's not going to be terrible. He's going to get you double-digit points. He's going to do his thing. But counting on him to be in the top 12, I've got him faded out of my top 12 for this week. On receivers that I like this week higher than consensus, one of those is Teteroa McMillan that I touched on earlier at home for the Carolina Panthers versus Miami. I like this as a bounce-back spot for Carolina. They seem to be on again, off again this year. I touched on a couple of things with him earlier about him being an alpha receiver in that Neighbors, Thomas Jr., your big-time receivers. He's getting peppered with targets this year, and I think he's going to continue to see those types of targets against Miami at home. You're looking at the fact that over the last several weeks, he's had 19 plus targets here and there. He was held down a little bit against Detroit. Excuse me, not against Detroit, but he was held down a little bit in week 3. But I think he bounces back here in week 5. I firmly see him as one of my top wide receivers for this week. Another wide receiver that I actually like higher than consensus for this week is, let's see, the one that Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, touched on that for just a few minutes earlier. He had a breakthrough moment last week where he caught a pass, started making catches in the second half. The difference between his first half and second half last week was lights out. We actually saw the Marvin Harrison Jr. that was a first-round draft pick. We saw why they picked him so high, why they wanted him in the lineup. And I think this week against Tennessee, which Tennessee is not good, they give up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I think Harrison Jr. catches another touchdown pass as him and Murray stay on the same page this week. On to the tight ends for this week. The dumpster fire position, we do not have the Travis Kelce wrecking shop being one of the top tight ends, top players in all of fantasy. We do have a consensus top 3. Right now it's Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, and Tyler Warren, who Warren is kind of filling the role for George Kittle, who was injured and was a consensus top 3 coming in for the draft. My rankings this week aren't that much different. I got Trey McBride at tight end 1 at home for the Cardinals versus the Tennessee Titans. It's Trey McBride. I think they're going to be able to have some success passing the ball. I like Murray as a top 12 quarterback this week. McBride is the tight end 1 right now. Brock Bowers, banged up a little bit, has some weird play calling. I like him as tight end 2 this week for the Raiders at Indianapolis versus the Colts. The reason I like him is I think the Colts are going to put the clamps on the running game, shut down J&T a little bit. I think Bowers is going to get peppered with targets where Smith's going to throw the ball 30-plus times this week. My tight end 3 on the week, like I just said, top 3 rankings consensus for me, Tyler Warren, the rookie from Indianapolis, in that same game with Brock Bowers. Might see a little tight end to tight end, the 2 guys competing to try to put on a show. Tyler Warren had a rushing touchdown this past week. He did that in college. He had rushing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns. He even threw for a touchdown. This week at home versus the Raiders, I think he gets peppered with some targets early and often. He owns the intermediate field for the Colts, so much so that he's kind of dwarfed Josh Downs where he's not getting a lot of touches, like Tyler Warren as tight end 3. My tight end 4 this week, speaking of tight ends who get peppered with targets, is Jake Ferguson for the Dallas Cowboys. They travel to New York and play the Jets. Jake Ferguson has become the ultimate security blanket for Dak Prescott now that CeeDee Lamb is down. Last week he had 7 targets, had 7 catches, turned that into 7 catches, 40 yards and a touchdown. They keep finding ways to get him open on low trajectory depth targets. He's got solid hands. Dak trusts him. I like him as tight end 4 this week. Tight end 5 this week is Travis Kelce for me. He's got a Monday night matchup in Jacksonville with the Jaguars. He's Mahomes' most trusted asset, receiving asset. And with the addition of Xavier Worthy back this week, I like Kelce getting open underneath. He's going to get peppered with targets. I would love it, and I think we might see it, one of those shovel pass touchdowns this week from Mahomes to Kelce. And that's why I've got Kelce as my tight end 5. My tight end 6 is Sam Laporta. I like Sam Laporta. I like a lot of Lions this week. They're playing the Bengals. The Bengals can't stop anybody. Even in Cincinnati, doesn't matter. Again, watch out for a blowout. Laporta's my tight end 6 this week. My tight end 7 this week is Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints at home versus the New York Giants. Watch out, though. Got a questionable tag popped up. I've also heard some Taysom Hill news that he might be coming back soon. So watch out for that. But check the injury report for Juwan Johnson. But so far this year, he's been peppered with targets. He's been a part of their game plan. I think they'll have a back-and-forth game with the Giants. I think he's going to get peppered with some targets, and he's my tight end 7. My tight end 8 this week is Hunter Henry for the New England Patriots at Buffalo on a Sunday night. primetime divisional game. This is going to be more of a shootout than I think people expect. I'm really high on Drake May this week. I really like Hunter Henry to be his target in the end zone or red zone. He's their touchdown maker. He has been, and I like him as my tight end 8 this week, where I think he gets in the end zone against Buffalo in Buffalo. My tight end 9 this week. A lot of people have been fading him, and he's been losing targets to one of my favorite rookies that I've been touting over the offseason was Harold Fenton Jr. This is David Njoku that I like at tight end 9. He is questionable. Popped up on the injury report on Wednesday. Check that out. Make sure that he's playing this week. If not, you might want to slide Fenton Jr. in there. But if Njoku is playing at 9:30 Sunday morning in London versus Minnesota with Dylan Gabriel starting, I think Njoku is that safety blanket that Gabriel needs. He's going to find him easy open over the middle instead of taking chances down the field, and I think Njoku gets peppered with targets this week where he finishes as my tight end 9. My tight end 10 this week is probably one of my favorite matchups that I like. We've talked about it already. It's Dalton Kincaid for the Buffalo Bills at home versus the New England Patriots. I think this turns into a shootout. I like Kincaid. He's one of Allen's favorite targets. I think we're going to see him continue to grow as the year goes on. He's my tight end 10 this week. At tight end 11, I've got Zach Ertz. He doesn't have an injuries designation this week as him and the Commanders travel to LA to play the Chargers. Pay attention to Jaden Daniels, though. If Daniels is playing, I think Daniels and Herbert duel against each other in what's going to be a shootout. I like Zach Ertz as my tight end 11 if Daniels is playing. If Mariota is playing, I drop Ertz down probably to 14, maybe 15, 16 area. Not too far, but he drops out of my top 12 if Daniels isn't playing. But I do like him this week as tight end 11 with Daniels. My tight end 12 this week for the Jacksonville Jaguars is Brenton Strange. He's been uniquely consistent, been getting peppered with targets. Everybody was wondering who was going to be the second receiving option there. I'll talk about him a little bit more as he comes into his Monday night matchup at home versus the Kansas City Chiefs. My fade this week at tight end is Dallas Goedert. It kind of goes hand in hand with my fade of Jalen Hurts. I'm fading Jalen Hurts because I don't think there's going to be a lot of aerial attack through their offense this week against Denver. Denver can shut down passing games. They're notorious for it. Goddard is kind of touchdown dependent, and I just don't see that happening. I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease this week. A.J. Brown has said some things. I think he's going to get a few targets here and there. Of the minimal low-end targets that they get, the Eagles don't throw for a lot of yards. Denver only gives up the 6th least amount of fantasy points to tight end. Like I said, they lead the NFL in sacks with 15. They're going to put a lot of pressure on Hurts. I think the running game is going to need to be consistent. I think we have a disappearing game where I'm fading Dallas Goedert this week. Tight ends that I'm higher on than normal, and I kind of touched on these as we went through them and talked about them. David Njoku, like I said, that security blanket, rookie quarterback Dylan Gabriel coming in. They're going to see a lot of consistent pressure from Brian Flores, a lot of exotic different looks. I think that Gabriel is going to want to take the easy route out. The easy route is going to be Njoku standing there over the middle, catching those safety blanket targets. I like him for 7, 8 targets this week minimum. I could see him with 5 catches, 60, 70 yards, and probably coming up with the touchdown. He's always been good in the red zone. I like him in the red zone this week, and that's why I like him as my tight end 9 this week. Another person that I'm higher on consensus than at tight end, Brenton Strange. You heard me touch on it. This has all the makings of a potential high-scoring game in Jacksonville versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes and company was rolling last week with Worthy back. Jacksonville is capable of doing the same thing. They've got a stout running game with ETN, who's looking good this year. Bashal Tutin, the rookie, is looking well. And we know Brian Thomas Jr. has had some iffy situations where he's been faded as a wide receiver this year, hasn't done great. Strange, though, has been extremely consistent all year long. And by that, when I say consistent, I'm looking at the fact that over the course of the last 2 games, he's had 7 targets in both, 6 receptions in both, and at least 45 yards in 3 of the 4 games he's played this year. In a game that could be a shootout where they're going to have to go and score a lot of points, I like Strange again for 7 catches, 60, 70 yards. I like his opportunity chance of getting in the end zone, especially against Kansas City, because, Kansas City allows the 4th fewest points to the tight end position, but that's not out of the fact that, they're going to have to focus on the outside receivers of Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, and then some other guys. Parker Washington's been playing well. I really like Brendan Strange this week. Even without a touchdown, I think he ends up as tight end 12. And with that, guys, that is going to be the official Week 5 offensive rankings for this week. And, we've got some football coming up, Thursday night football. Keep in mind, like I said, wake up early, 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, Eastern Standard Time, 9:30 a.m., because we got the game in London, which is an international game, another one this week. Should have a great slate of games on Sunday, and then a Monday night game. The Sunday night game, like I said, I'm looking forward to New England Buffalo. Should be huge. And then Monday night, we've got another great matchup. So, hey, if you're on X, follow me at JKeezy. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about your top 12 lists. Who do you like in the top 12? Who are you fading this week? What did I hit on? What did I miss on? Let's talk about it. Shoot me a follow, and I'll be sure to follow you back. Also, check out IDP Plus for the greatest in defensive player fantasy football information, anything you can need. The YouTube channel is fantastic. Do the same for Big Guy Fantasy Sports, the #1 consistency fantasy football site that you can find. Great tools there, great articles on both sites, great tools everywhere. Check those out. And hey, good luck in your leagues this week, and I hope that you got everything you wanted on waiver wires, and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.